I'm a married man. I know how to take direction.
This is Dennis Wilenchik, and we're here on KFNX 1100. And speaking of which, let's talk about direction in the sense of Senate Bill 1070 while we're at it. My understanding was that nobody knows that law like you do. You wrote it, basically, right?
Well, I did. I had people I went to that I considered bright constitutional attorneys. Chris Kobach, who helped me tweak some things because we knew we'd be sued. Well, you've been there. We were sued on Prop 200, been to court 7 times. We were sued on employer sanctions, been to court 6 times.
Yeah.
Finally, a 5-3 decision in the United States Supreme Court. Great decision, not only because it was about going after illegal employers, it was about states' rights.
Yeah.
The ability of states to enforce their laws and protect their jobs, their citizens. I mean, and 1070 is headed that same direction.
Well, you know, while you're on that real quick, this preemption issue is the big issue. And that's the big one that the federal government loves to tout, right? Because that's what you're talking about.
It's interesting, and I hope Susan Bolton gets that appointment to the Ninth Circuit. She certainly has worked well with the Obama administration to get it with her ruling. It was all political. The Obama
I didn't even know there was an opening. So is there an opening?
They're not, but she's waiting. I guarantee you.
Okay. Right.
Waiting in the wings.
Got
it. But you're right. This preemption issue is such a myth. Had Congress wanted, first of all, in just a little constitution, the states got together and created the federal government. Most people have forgotten that. The federal government works for the states. They gave them limited powers, enumerated powers, very limited.
I mean, the states gave the federal government limited power.
Right. They created the federal government.
Not the other way around.
No, they created the federal government. They said, here's all you can do in Articles 1, 2, and 3. And then to make sure that they had the Bill of Rights, and in the 10th Amendment they said, and to codify all of the powers under the states and respectively we the people. It was, the states have the authority and the power. The states have never been preempted from enforcing the law. Regulation, now that's a different story. The federal government has the sole authority to regulate. Enforcement is not regulation.
And of course, interstate commerce, things of that nature that cross state lines.
Yeah, that's the most abused thing in the world. But the point is, if Congress had wanted to preempt the states, they would have used what are called their plenary powers. They have never done that. Absent that, the states have inherent authority, not delegated, inherent authority to enforce those laws. And this
seems like this is the big
cop-out.
Don't you think this is like the big cop-out? All these decisions are focused on that issue because it's an easy issue from this cop-out.
Well, yeah, and first of all, let's just take a logical step here with it. Had Congress, if the states really had been preempted, if we really didn't want local law enforcement to enforce the laws, why would you have 2 federal statutes, 8 U.S.C. 1644 and 8 U.S.C. 1373, that prevents the states from having sanctuary policies, prevents them from having policies that limit the enforcement of these laws? That's the first thing right there. It's pretty clear. They preempt the states from not enforcing.
And it's really illegal to be in a state.
Yes.
And so if somebody is stopped, it seems logical to anybody.
We arrest people on bank robbery every day, federal statutes, no protest there. We arrest guys on the federal gun statutes every day, no protest there. We arrest them on federal drug statutes every day, no protest there. But we protest this, and why? Because you've got 2 groups that have locked hands in the back door. The cheap labor advocates, those that I call the profits over patriotism crowd, who want cheap labor at all costs. It's not cheap, it costs you not the tax very huge. And then you have the other side, the cheap vote side, and they want to change the political makeup of America, and they want to do that through demographics, and their best hope for that is open borders.
Now, there was a rumor, and I don't know if it's true or not, but that you wanted to actually argue the 1070 case.
Yeah, I understand they don't allow non-lawyers to do that, but I did. I know this law. I know the history
Must have
of
been
this law. I
frustrating
wrote this law. I know the constitutional provisions. I know the debate going back to the creation of the federal government by the states from our founders, and the arguments are so clear. It's more about states' rights than it is anything else.
Yeah.
States have an inherent right to protect their citizens, to enforce the law. They've never been preempted.
Particularly where the federal government abdicates their responsibility.
Especially, that even adds merit to it when they have failed. And what is John Napolitano's response? To put up signs 30 miles from Phoenix going in are too dangerous. That's her secure border answer. It's outrageous and embarrassing. And again, I mentioned earlier about Rob Kranz being murdered on the border during the debate of 1070. The 12 Phoenix police officers have been killed and maimed. I have a good heart. I'm not a mean guy, but how do you ignore the damage to this wonderful country?
Well, I think that's another thing. People are saying that that's a myth, that there really isn't that much crime, that there isn't that much of a problem caused by these folks, that there's no statistics to support that, et cetera, et cetera. What's your take on that?
Let me tell you real quickly. Since Arizona's been enforcing laws, let's just go back to Prop 100 in 06, or actually 07 employer sanctions that I wrote. And again, we just won the Supreme Court. I have to throw it in. I'm so proud of the Supreme Court for their stand up.
But that rested also on the specifics that the court held that was that a preemption issue also?
It was.
Yeah.
And the court said not only do the states have a right, they have an obligation.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it. Judge Roberts, who wrote the majority opinion, was so on. It was wonderful. But anyway, because it is about states' rights and states' obligation to their citizens. States are unlimited in their powers. It's our job to take care of our citizens. And the one job the federal government does have that they don't do well
but didn't he rule on
is
a very
secure the
narrow
border.
issue on that?
Did he what?
To uphold that, didn't he come up with sort of a narrow issue? I'm trying to remember it now fully, but I thought he came up with a very narrow reason as to why he upheld that.
Well, he quoted
something
some
in
of
the statute itself.
Right. He quoted some of the statutes specifically that we put in. I give Chris Kobach great credit. He's the guy that said, we need to put this language in the bill also. I said, yeah, it makes sense. I liked it too.
And what was that?
Now you got me. It was a phrase dealing with what we do, dealing with the preemption issue.
Yeah, that's what I recall.
And it was tied to the federal government, following the federal government, and allowing them to make final determination for purposes of deportation. See, we were not trying to tread on federal territory.
Right.
We have a right to arrest based on probable cause like any other crime. But the federal government or a 287G trained officer, which in essence is a federal officer, they can make final determination for purposes of deportation. So we were very careful how we worded this all the way, and are we grateful we did that, because that's exactly part of what he hung his hat on.
All right,
but I got to say something. Whenever he
Yeah.
talks about 1070, you'd think it was controversial, and it is with some folks. You'd think it was divisive, and it is with some folks. 3/4 of Americans support it from coast to coast. 30 states are running legislative model after 1070. So who's it divisive with? The liberal media and the open border crowd who have no respect for our laws and ignore the damage to this wonderful country.
Yeah, well, that's usually the case, and they get all the press.
Yeah, they do.
I hear you. Yeah, the silent majority, of course, never gets heard. Let's turn to Prop 200. Well, but by the way, on 1070, what's your prediction on that?
It'll be the same as employer sanctions, House Bill 2779. It'll be I think we'll have a Keegan, I think she'll recuse herself again because she also was engaged in trying to stop this through some of her research in her previous assignment. That's why we had a 5-3 decision on employer sanctions, because she recused herself. I think she'll recuse herself again, but I think you have the same 5-3 decision in favor of TSA. We're not preempted. It enforces the law.
What about Prop 200? Tell our listeners what that's all about and what your involvement was. Of course, I was involved in the lower court trial of that, but tell our listeners what that's about.
Dennis, you get into it's so hard for me to tell a short story.
Well, let's just say this: it has to do with obviously the
three things.
Yeah.
And again, it started because Napolitano vetoed a bill to simply require ID at the polls.
Right.
So I gathered a little group of people in my office, 4 of us, and I said, we're going to go to the citizens. We're going to protect the integrity of our elections and protect the taxpayer. It was called the Arizona Citizens and Taxpayer Protection Act, and Prop 200, as is known. Protect Arizona Now. So anyway, we got in it, we gathered signatures the old-fashioned way, hard work, labor, sweat, very little money. We did it with volunteers mostly, and then we had a little money at the end, thank heaven. We were really close to not making it.
But there, too, the bottom line to that law was simply that they have to show proof of identification.
Well, first of all, 3 things. Proof of citizenship to register to vote, something I think our founding fathers decided on a long time ago.
And that's done most of the time by a driver's license, 96% of the time, probably.
Yeah, it is, because in Arizona, you don't have to prove citizenship, but you have to prove legal presence to get an Arizona driver's license. But the second standard was ID at the polls, 2 forms of ID at the polls. After show 2 forms of ID to get a blockbuster move, we thought voting ought to be on the same par. And then the third provision was no public benefits for those who are in this country illegally. I mean, you're in the country illegally, you can't take advantage of the taxpayer. Governor Napolitano and Terry Goddard did a backdoor veto on that and refused to implement Section 6 of Prop 200 on the public benefits side. And it was a battle, and it continued to be. We've been upheld through the courts. Now we've got a little bit of a problem at the 9th. Senator Dale Connor, our own, who doesn't believe protecting the integrity of our elections is worth it. I'm embarrassed and saddened by that ruling. It was a 2-3 ruling. It was not unanimous.
I argued that in front of her for the counties.
Well, it was bad. I never expected that out of her.
So, And who knows where that's going to go, right? I mean, it's
well,
not
I hope
from
it goes to the Supreme Court because I think we'll win that too.
But the
right now
Court of
state-
Appeals has now got it in bank, and they haven't done anything with it.
Right, and that's the problem. It's going to linger there for a while, and we know that. That's why we made the special appeal on 1070, because we knew it'd linger for 2 years in the Ninth Circuit Court or more. We knew we were going to be at the Supreme Court anyway. Well, let's go now. Let's get right up there and get it done, and that's what should have been done with Prop 202. So that's true.
Let me
But I
ask you a
think we'll
tough
win.
question before we take our next break, which is probably our last break as I look at the clock. Is there anything your opponents say about you that you agree with or can concede may be true? Tough question.
Well, it is tough because, they have an opinion. I don't want to demean folks because good people can disagree, but I'm disappointed because, when you are advocating for those who write the law, and the real issue is 1070, and there's other issues too, but the others are complete myths. The one thing that I think, and they're staying away from 1070, that was the issue that started this whole thing. They started the recall 3 weeks after I was elected as president of the Senate. Has nothing to do with performance. In fact, this recall is based on the fact I kept my promises. The things they're trying to recall me on are the things that I promised my district I would do, and we did.
Well, I got to
So
say,
it's
for the
disappointing.
record, I agree with you. I think if people want somebody out of office, they can vote at the voting booth.
Yeah, and get the nomination from their party as required.
Otherwise, it's a big waste of money and time for everybody. Russell Pearce, we've been delighted to have you on board here on Legalese. I appreciate it. I hope you'll come back in the future.
Anytime.
And when we see what happens to some of these, laws and whether they're upheld or not. And thank you for being here. This is Dennis Wilenchik on Legalese. We'll see you next Wednesday, or I guess we won't see you, but you'll hear me next Wednesday from 4 to 5 before Lou Dobbs. And thanks again, Russell. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, sir. Thank
Take
you
care.
much.
Be good.
Thank you. God bless.